In this episode, we look at identity architecture, which is the way an organization designs accounts, privileges, service identities, and administrative access so systems can work without giving away too much power. Identity is often described as an access control topic, but it is also an architecture topic because accounts become part of how the environment is built. Applications need identities to connect to databases. Services need identities to run scheduled jobs. Administrators need identities to maintain systems. Users need identities to reach the tools and data assigned to them. If those identities are designed poorly, the whole architecture becomes weaker. A single overpowered service account can create a path to sensitive data. A forgotten administrator account can become an attacker's doorway. Privileges can grow quietly over time until nobody knows why they exist. Strong identity design helps make access specific, accountable, limited, and recoverable when something fails. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.News in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A service account is an account used by an application, service, process, script, or system rather than by a person sitting at a keyboard. That distinction matters because service accounts often run in the background and may need access even when no human is signed in. A backup job may need to read files. A web application may need to connect to a database. A monitoring tool may need to collect system information. A deployment process may need to update an application. These accounts are necessary, but they are risky when they are treated casually. If a service account has a password that never changes, broad permissions, no clear owner, and weak logging, it can become a long-term target. Attackers like service accounts because they may be powerful, quiet, and trusted by other systems. Identity architecture should treat them as important design components, not as technical leftovers. Group Managed Service Account, gMSA, is a type of managed service account used in some Windows domain environments to help services run with better password management and centralized control. The basic security value is that the account password can be managed automatically instead of being manually created, shared, stored, and rarely changed. Manual service account passwords often create problems. Someone may put the password in a script, save it in a document, send it through chat, or leave it unchanged for years because nobody wants to break the service. A gMSA helps reduce that risk by letting the environment handle password rotation and by limiting which systems can use the account. At the Security Plus level, you do not need to configure one. You should understand why it exists. It supports safer service identity by reducing shared secrets and making service account use more controlled. A gMSA is useful because service accounts need to be both reliable and secure. If a password changes incorrectly, a business service can fail. If a password never changes and is widely known, an attacker may use it for a long time. Managed service account designs try to solve that tension. The service can continue running, while password handling becomes less dependent on human memory and informal processes. This does not make the account harmless. A gMSA still needs the right permissions, a clear purpose, an owner, monitoring, and review. If the account is allowed to access too many systems or perform too many actions, automatic password management will not fix the excessive privilege. Good architecture combines safer credential handling with least privilege. The account should be managed well and also limited to only the access its service truly needs. Least privilege accounts are accounts designed to have only the permissions needed for their intended purpose. This applies to human users, administrators, service accounts, application identities, and automation processes. Least privilege is easy to say and harder to maintain because people often ask for broad access when work is urgent or unclear. A developer may request administrator access to solve a deployment problem. A service account may receive database owner rights because nobody knows the exact permission it needs. A help desk account may accumulate more authority as new tasks are added. Each shortcut may feel reasonable in the moment, but the architecture becomes weaker when powerful access becomes normal. A least privilege account should have a defined role, limited scope, and a reason for every permission. When the job changes, the permissions should be reviewed instead of simply adding more. Least privilege is especially important for administrative accounts. An administrator account can change systems, create users, reset passwords, modify security settings, read sensitive data, or disable controls depending on its role. If an administrator uses the same account for email, browsing, daily work, and system management, that account is exposed to many ordinary risks. A phishing email, malicious attachment, or compromised website may become more dangerous because the account has elevated power. A better design separates ordinary user activity from privileged administration. The person may have one account for daily work and another account for administrative tasks. The administrative account should be used only when needed and should be protected with stronger authentication, logging, and restrictions. This separation does not remove all risk, but it reduces the chance that everyday activity becomes a direct path to high-value control. Privileged Access Management, PAM, is a set of processes and technologies used to control, monitor, and protect highly privileged accounts. PAM can include special approval workflows, session recording, password vaulting, temporary access, just-in-time access, and stronger monitoring for administrative actions. The larger idea is that privileged access should be deliberate, visible, and limited. An administrator may not need standing administrator rights all day, every day. They may need elevated access for a specific task, for a specific time, on a specific system. Just-in-time access supports that model by granting privilege only when needed and removing it afterward. This reduces the amount of time an attacker can benefit from a compromised privileged account. PAM also improves accountability because sensitive administrative actions can be tied to a person, request, session, and approved purpose. Privilege creep happens when accounts slowly collect more access than they need. This often occurs because job duties change, projects come and go, emergencies require temporary access, or people move between teams. Instead of replacing old permissions with new ones, organizations may simply add more. Over months or years, a user account may retain access to systems tied to old roles. A service account may gain new permissions as applications expand. An administrator may remain in groups that are no longer relevant. Privilege creep is dangerous because it can be quiet. Nobody may notice until an incident occurs or an audit asks why the access exists. Attackers benefit from privilege creep because a compromised account may open more doors than anyone expected. Good identity architecture includes regular access reviews, role cleanup, expiration dates for temporary access, and clear ownership of permissions. Privilege creep can also affect groups, not just individual accounts. Many organizations use groups to simplify access management. Instead of assigning permissions one person at a time, they add users to groups that represent roles, teams, applications, or responsibilities. This is useful, but groups can become messy. A group may be reused for a new purpose without removing old access. Nested groups may make it hard to see who ultimately has permission. A temporary project group may become permanent. A broad group may be granted access because it was faster than creating a precise one. Over time, group membership and resource permissions may no longer match the real business need. Identity architecture should make groups understandable. A good group should have a clear name, purpose, owner, membership rule, and review process. Otherwise, groups become hidden pathways for excess privilege. Failure modes are the ways a design can break, behave unexpectedly, or create risk when something goes wrong. In identity architecture, failure modes matter because access systems are often central to everything else. If the identity provider fails, users may not be able to sign in. If an account lockout policy is too aggressive, a password attack may become a denial of service problem for real users. If a service account password expires without proper management, an application may stop working. If a privileged account is disabled without a backup plan, administrators may be unable to recover a system. If emergency access accounts are poorly protected, attackers may target them. Strong design asks what could fail before it fails. Identity is not only about allowing or denying access. It is also about keeping access dependable, recoverable, and safe under stress. Service account failure modes can be especially disruptive. A service may depend on an account to start, connect to a database, read a file share, write logs, or call another application. If that account is deleted, disabled, locked, expired, or stripped of a needed permission, the service may fail. If the account has too much access, the service may keep working but create security exposure. This creates a balance between reliability and restriction. The safer approach is not to give every service account broad permissions forever. The safer approach is to document what the account does, assign ownership, use managed credential handling where possible, monitor its activity, and test changes before applying them to production. If a permission must be removed, the team should understand which service may be affected. Good architecture reduces surprise by making service identities visible and managed. Administrative access has its own failure modes. If too many people have administrator rights, compromise risk rises and accountability becomes weaker. If too few people have administrator rights, recovery may be delayed when the one available expert is unavailable. If all privileged access depends on one identity service, an outage in that service may prevent administrators from fixing the outage. If emergency accounts exist but are not monitored, they may be abused quietly. If emergency accounts are locked away so tightly that nobody can use them during a crisis, they may not help. This is why identity architecture must include break glass planning. A break glass account is an emergency account used when normal access paths fail. It should be strongly protected, rarely used, logged, reviewed, and tested. It exists because resilience sometimes requires a controlled exception, not because normal controls are unimportant. Identity design is part of architecture because identities connect systems together. A database trusts an application identity. A backup platform trusts a service account. A cloud workload trusts an assigned role. An administrator account controls infrastructure. An automation process deploys changes. If those identities are poorly designed, network segmentation and system hardening can be undermined. An attacker who steals a broadly trusted identity may move through paths that firewalls and application controls were not meant to stop. This is why identity should be mapped like any other architectural dependency. You should know which accounts are used by which services, what privileges they have, where credentials are stored, how authentication happens, and what logs show their activity. A system diagram that shows servers but not service identities is incomplete. The trust relationships between accounts and systems are part of the real design. Good identity architecture also supports incident response. During an investigation, defenders may need to know whether a service account was used normally or unusually, whether an administrator account performed a sensitive change, whether a user had access because of an old group membership, or whether a privilege elevation was approved. If accounts are shared, unnamed, undocumented, or overpowered, investigation becomes harder. If each privileged action is tied to a specific identity, device, time, and reason, defenders can move with more confidence. Strong logging matters, but logging only helps if the identity design makes events meaningful. A log that says a shared administrator account made a change may not reveal which person was responsible. A log that shows a managed privileged session tied to an approved request is much more useful. Accountability is not just a policy word. It is something architecture can either support or weaken. Identity architecture is one of the strongest examples of security design shaping daily operations. Group-managed service accounts help reduce the danger of manually handled service passwords, but they still need limited permissions and clear ownership. Least privilege accounts reduce damage by giving users, services, and administrators only the access they need. Privilege creep shows why access must be reviewed over time instead of trusted forever. Failure modes remind you that identity systems must be reliable, recoverable, and safe when something breaks. Service accounts and administrative privileges deserve special attention because they often connect critical systems and carry powerful trust. As you study architecture, remember that identity is not just a login screen. It is the control layer that decides which people, services, and systems can act. When identity is designed carefully, the entire environment becomes easier to protect, monitor, and recover.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.